Hello, welcome back. We are on topic 7.5 of chapter 7, the last topic in chapter 7. Can you believe it? It feels like we've been on this chapter forever. Anywho, the last topic. So if you'll remember when we started this semester, we said that management has three main responsibilities, and managerial accounting helps them with those three responsibilities. They were planning, evaluating, and controlling. And actually your book puts controlling second. So let's follow that. Okay, so if you remember that, and planning, right, that's when we're setting goals for the future, controlling, making sure that we're on track to meet those goals, and then evaluating after we reach that point, seeing how we measured up against those goals. So topic 7.5, it's entitled Evaluating Goals. So the information that we're going to learn in this section is going to help us with that last management responsibility. So we're going to learn a couple different, they go by different names, budget reports. Let me see what your book calls them. Budget variances. Okay, basically the report that we're going to look at is going to help us compare actual results, actual figures, to expected or budgeted figures. Right? Because it's no fun if we spend all that time budgeting and then we just lose track of how we actually measured up to those goals, right? Because then we're not going to be able to control for the future to reach or surpass those goals. So at the end of the period, we have to do like a true up. We have to compare and see how do our actuals measure against what we expected, right? And then control from that point on. So we're going to be introduced to a couple different reports that are going to help us compare actuals to those expected figures. The first one is going to be actuals versus our static budget. The second one is going to be actual figures versus our flexible budget. Okay, let me show you an example of what that format looks like. That's a little bit prettier than what I can do. It's in your book. It's on page 380 for this one, page 380, and this one is on page 381. Okay, so let me show you those. So here is the actual versus the static budget variance report. And so here's a column with all of our actual figures after September 30th. Figures have arrived and been computed, compared to the static budgets like the master budget that we prepared, and then a third column that shows the difference or the variance. And then after that numerical variance, we indicate whether that variance was favorable or unfavorable. Okay, so let me tell you how we will know. If it is a favorable variance, that means that net income increased. How would net income increase? Either your revenues were higher than you expected or your expenses were lower. So your actual revenue was higher or your actual expenses were lower than what you anticipated, causing net income to be higher. That would be a favorable variance. If it is an unfavorable variance, it's going to be the opposite, right? It means that net income was lower than we were anticipating. How does this happen? Your actual revenue was lower than you had anticipated, or your actual expenses were higher than you had expected. So that's what can create an unfavorable variance and a favorable variance. For me, when you're doing these budget reports, you are free to abbreviate this as just F. So that way you don't have to write out the entire word every single time. That's going to cause your wrist some pain. And for unfavorable, you can just go ahead and place a U. It's the only time you can say FU in this class, okay? Only time it's acceptable when we're talking about budget variances. All right, so you just saw an actual versus static budget example. The actual versus flexible budget variance on page 381, very similar, right? We still have our three columns. We have our actual results for the period. We have our budget, but now this is flexible budget. And notice one important thing, that your units will always be the same for a flexible budget. Okay, it's always going to be the same. Whereas with a static budget, that is very rarely going to be the case. Okay, they're different. So that's the big difference between a flexible and a static. Because remember, a static budget is unmoving. So if you projected at 1,500 units, it stays there, regardless of what your actual results are. A flexible budget variance report, it's going to flex or move the units to the actual quantity. Okay, so these will always be the same. Sales price might be different, but the units will be the same. Okay, so that's one thing to note. The format otherwise is similar. We have our 3 columns, we compute our variance. There should always be no variance for the units because, like I said, those will be the same. And then you'll indicate the differences as either favorable or unfavorable depending on how they impacted net income. I'll go ahead and pull up an example and we'll actually prepare one of these reports in the next video. Thanks.